Hi everybody, I'm Stacey with Team Soul Navigation and welcome to Talk Show Tuesday. I am filling in this week for Meredith and we have such a special guest with us today. Today we have Ciara with Team Soul Navigation. She is a reader and a healer with Team Soul Navigation and it is so great to have her here with us today. Today we're going to be talking about past lives. Welcome Ciara, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you Stacey. How are you?
I'm doing well. So,
good.
Are you ready to talk about past lives?
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about it.
All right. Well, I know that as a healer, you've probably come across this many times, but how do you find that past lives actually play a role in our current lives?
I think the past lives are really fascinating because the patterns that we established in our past lives will play a role in how we interact in our current lives. So a lot of the challenges that our soul has already experienced in other lives will show up in this life in order for us to process them and to clear them and to energetically release the emotion around certain situations. So for example, if you have maybe money blocks in this life, it may have stemmed from multiple past lives. Or if you have certain karmas, they may have originated in past lives and they come up in this life at the same time as having them in past lives. And the reason that they come in this life is to process them and to release them. So it's actually a blessing to figure out which patterns are played out in so many lives because you're given the opportunity on earth this time to process and release those karmas and the situations that have affected us so many times in past lives. And the other thing that I'd say is that a lot of the souls that we meet on our journey in this life, we've probably already met them before. And that's really, really important for us to understand because then we can understand certain dynamics in our lives and understand where they came from and what we need to learn or release in those relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you touched on the money sort of blocks for people. And I think that's so important because a lot of souls have a challenging time with things like worthiness. And oftentimes because we've incarnated so much, we can even have been incarnated as perhaps a monk or a priest or, some type of religious aspect where we've taken vows of sort of poverty. And so all that energy is still within us, even in this lifetime that we're all working through. So it's really fascinating.
So interesting. And the other thing which you've already touched on, you said about vows, and that's really interesting that you mentioned that because we form vows with other souls in our past lives and we don't ever release them until we consciously recognize that they're there. So you may be holding vows with other souls or vows with yourself or vows about certain things that you've accumulated through these past lives and they're within you. So there actually might be blocking big areas of your life. So for example, one vow, which you've already mentioned, you mentioned about poverty, but one that it's really it's not a coincidence we're talking about this, but today I was working on some heart vows that I hold, and that's another one. It's you may hold vows to love someone forever, or you may hold a vow that you'll serve someone else or that you'll give your heart to someone else in an unhealthy way, but you made that so many lifetimes ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's so amazing how the energy can sort of be recycling not only through our being and our cells, but also the energy around us as well. So I know that, what do you find is the most interesting part of how the pattern can repeat and where we can find that in certain dynamics with other people in our lives that we may know or experience or come upon?
Yeah, 100%. So I think that every single real big tension or challenge, or if you find yourself in a situation where there's so much energy around it, there's probably past life roots. And you might see that in certain dynamics. So, when you meet someone for the first time and also you feel a really strong energy between the two of you, whether that's positive, whether that's negative, whether it's just really confusing, there's probably a root because your souls know each other. So the way your souls were in the past, it will automatically you'll feel the energy that is between the two of you. So that's really interesting, especially between other people where the patterns start playing out. But what I would say is that when you have those situations and you recognize that there's a past life between you, I think that's really powerful, because the recognition starts to release it. So once you recognize it, it releases it. So when you see the patterns playing out and you're like, there's a lot more energy in this situation that explains from my current life experience. So you might look back at your current life and you may be like, there's nothing really bad that's happened to me to that scale to warrant such a big like energetic reaction. And that's normally when you can notice that the patterns played out.
Yeah. Have you ever found, like, let's take a look specifically at like romantic relationships.
Yeah.
Have you ever found or worked with somebody where their current dynamic with their partner stemmed from dynamics that maybe they've had in past lives together too? Because oftentimes, whether we want to call it karmic partners or soulmates or people who we've incarnated with before, there can be patterns that we can also incarnate with again with specific people. Have you ever found where you've been able to help somebody shift through that?
Yeah, 100%. I found it with partners where they've been like brothers and sisters before. Like that is a really common one actually. And I found with like some clients that you'll find that they had a brother-sister relationship with certain partners. That's actually the most, I don't know why, but that's the most common thing that I found, is that partners have been brother and sister before. And that's why they have such a love for each other. And it may sometimes explain why it's not like the ultimate romantic relationship and it becomes quite comfortable and they become like your best friend, but the kind of romance may have like, I mean, that's like just an example. Like that's not, obviously every situation is so different, but I have found that that's the case. And sometimes just clearing the energy of the brother and sister will help the relationship spark. Or like, for example, I've had other times where people have found out that their partners may have like been really harmful in past lives. So maybe if someone has like an abusive partner or their partner's not treating them properly, it's because they've got karma between that partner, where that partner that they have in the current life has abused them or been negative towards them in loads of different lives. And that's actually the most powerful to understand, because it's normally the fact that souls will need help when their partners they're not being treated properly, and that pattern of not being treated properly by a specific soul who may be your like partner in this life has come from so many past lives. So that's really like powerful to understand.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. Yeah, and I've also found that, you know, people who incarnate as romantic partners have had many lifetimes as brother and sister too. And someone told me once that it's the dynamic of a brother and sister, the love is a little bit more pure because we don't have that sort of romantic aspect of it. And so partners can incarnate through multiple lifetimes in different capacities. And for some reason, brother and sister tend to be a really popular one that souls choose to incarnate. And I think it's just fascinating that we can oftentimes, and this is where I always tell people, past lives can get a little weird, because our parent, for example, in this lifetime could have been a brother or sister, or even a partner for us, or a friend, or an enemy. And so there's all kinds of dynamics that can come into place with various people that we have chosen to incarnate with in this lifetime to work through different things. And I've also found that other people, like let's say, for example, a partner or a best friend, that their family can actually be people that we've incarnated with as maybe a mother or a father or a sibling. So there's lots of dynamics that we can experience in past lives. And then not only that, but when we reincarnate, we can have these connections with various people and feel these different things and kind of understand on a soul level why, but maybe not always know why.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because like you picked up on this with like, if you meet someone, like even if it's your partner's family and you're like, I feel like certain dynamics between them, normally, I mean, everyone has the gift of intuition, but if you are a more intuitive person and you can tap into your intuition, you normally can see what that person may have been to you. Like it's the classic example of someone who's not your mom, but they treat you like you're their daughter, or like you feel like motherly towards someone. It's probably because that has actually happened in a past life. And you can actually, like, although you can come and get readings like with like a reader who can see into past lives, like we both can, you actually have, people have the gift to understand what them dynamics may have been just by thinking about what the dynamic between two people is like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, a couple weeks ago, Susie and Henny talked about it in their talk show Tuesday that they did. But I think what's interesting for also people to understand is that we can incarnate as non-humans in a lifetime too. So like we can have a lifetime where we're maybe a star or an elemental or even nature spirits, and assist the earth and assist our loved ones, people in our soul tribe, in different capacities, even as maybe a guide for them that's, you know, still in a heavenly, divinely form. So I think that it's just so interesting that, and then on an individual level too, we all carry the memories of that within us.
We do, 100%.
Even from elemental or non-physical formed beings. Have you ever found in your healing practice where you've run across somebody who carries sort of more of a trauma or a wound from a lifetime that was maybe in non-human form, or even, I mean, we've also had various lifetimes where we can incarnate on other planets, which is like a whole other thing too. But have you ever had an experience with somebody to clear any of that or to work through that, or had something like that come up?
Yeah, the one thing that has actually come up in readings is about past lives in other dimensions, which, as you've like pointed out, it is like you can have them, as you say, on other planets, but you also, because there's so many dimensions, like we're in like the third or the fourth or the fifth density, like we'll switch between them, but there's so many dimensions that we can have past lives which haven't necessarily been in the dimension that we're currently in. So that has come up quite a lot for me in healing practice, with things like people being like spirit guides for other people, or like maybe animals, or as you say, like different elementary forms. I don't normally go into that in healing practice just because it's quite a big thing for a lot of people, but I have had it on a personal level where it's come through for like others that are in my life, rather than through like practicing as a healer in like a professional sense. I've had it where I've like it's come through me that I've been guides for people in my life, and it's like, that's really strange, as you said. But I also think that I've had it, and I've actually had this in readings, where people's pets, and they come to me like asking about their pets. It's like, your soul and your pet soul have been friends before, or like you guys have been together before. Like the reason you get on so well with your pet is because like they have a soul, and like you are so connected, and you can channel the soul through. And it's like the reason that you're so connected with your pet is because they have a soul and they're experiencing a life as a soul. So you've probably met them in a past life, which is so crazy, but it's definitely true that is like something that happens.
Absolutely and I do find that people are so very much connected to their pets, for sure.
100%.
So do you want to talk about karma a little bit?
100%. So one thing I've actually been thinking this through the whole video that's really important to share is one of the biggest karmas that we have coming to earth, and I don't know, Susie, whether you found this as well with like readings or yourself, is the rejection karma. Like so many souls have karma around being rejected, and that's like being rejected for who they are, for being their true self, being rejected from like opening up and having new experiences or relationships, or like reaching out to new people. There's so much karma around rejection, and a lot of souls that have incarnated at this time have a lot of rejection karma. Has that been something that you've also experienced?
I found that for sure, and also around abandonment for people too.
Rejection and abandonment. 100%.
And sometimes I find betrayal in there is pretty common for people too. And you know, I think what's interesting is, because I've worked with somebody previously who does like Lords of Karma work, and we can also have like ancient human karma that we carry as humans too. So sometimes the karma may not even be ours to work through, but it's the karma of the collective, so to speak, that we carry as humans, that we're all here to work through and to help sort of transmute.
And I think that karma is one of these things, and I'm sure you'll agree as well, Stacey, that people misunderstand what karma is. Like especially people who are like new to like understanding more spiritual things or how the universe works, they misunderstand the meaning of karma. Like, karma is not that if you do something it will come back round to you. It doesn't necessarily mean that. It's more that the energy that you hold within, that you've accumulated, is what's going to be presented to you in your outer life. So if like you're experiencing say, like I said about rejection, so say if you're experiencing rejection in your life, that's a karmic pattern that's within you, and it's like an energy within you, but it's yours. Does that make sense? You might have accumulated that over so many lives, but that karma is yours, and that's so powerful because then you can clear it. So there may be karmas between souls, but it's actually not between the souls, it's your karma. So that karma is like an energy that's within you that gets projected outwards. So then you see things in your life and you can see karmic situations, but the power gets taken back when you realize that that's the energy that you've accumulated. So if you release that, you'll stop seeing the situations.
Yeah. And I've found out that, you know, sort of when we have different dynamics that keep sort of playing out, or say that there's one particular person, I like to say that it's stories that are being told, like we're telling in our mind, or we're having those conversations with them, where once we find out that, or once we feel that that situation is no longer triggering us on a level 2, then we've worked through that karma in some capacity, whether it's within ourselves, because like you said, it's sort of this, when we have that karmic energy, it triggers whether it's the abandonment or the rejection from within us. And then we can feel that lighter element, and we know we've worked through that.
100%, I agree. And I think it's so easy, like, and pretty much everyone will have had this experience where they get so triggered by someone else, like someone else's maybe bad behavior, or that the person is being unkind, or they're being rude, or whatever that thing is, and you get so triggered and you make it about yourself, or you get really annoyed about it, or you put up with that behavior. And the thing is, what's like is quite hard to establish is like, it's still that person's behavior is their behavior, like it's got nothing to do with you. So once you clear the trigger of it and clear what's making you react, or why your vibration is matching theirs to be triggered in the first place, once you clear that person, it doesn't change what that person is. Like, that person on an energetic may have like rudeness or unkindness in their field, and that isn't your problem. It's your problem how you react to that, and that's where the karma lies. Because if you clear that and you don't stoop, I mean, I don't really like that phrase, but if you don't like energetically stoop to the levels that they're at, if you've cleared that within you, you just won't even be bothered by it. And that's like, so that's so powerful to understand, because it's so easy to like blame that person, like, oh, they're being rude. And it's like, yeah, they probably are being rude, but you don't need to like be triggered by it. And that's the powerful thing about karma.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I also find it interesting sometimes too, because especially with people that we really love and we care about, we can see that they're going through certain patterns or certain experiences where maybe we've worked through that and we want to try to help them. And it can become this very sort of fine line, because that person on some level, because when we come to Earth, we kind of choose the experiences that we want to have for our own growth and our own evolution of our soul. So in essence, if we sort of step in and help them, it can be actually taking away from whatever they wanted to learn or experience, or maybe even their own karma. So it can be a really fine line to work through. Have you found that, because I know last year in particular, I noticed it where, you know, we have these past incarnations of ourselves where, for example, let's say we were in a leadership role in a past life, and we can always want to feel like we need to have it together all the time. And these elements of these past lives kind of start creeping into our lives and our personality. Have you found where, because the veil is so thin right now, where there's a lot of almost merging of who we are now versus who we've been in other lifetimes, and that all coming together for people in a greater way?
Yeah, 100%. And I think, as you say, like the veil has been thinning, and there's been so many energetic, like even with astrology, like transits, and there's been so much like shifts vibrationally upwards, and part of that is like integrating our past selves. And I think that as you say, like it's happened on purpose, because it's bringing in all the karmas into one, so you feel it all. And I think that's like an ascension symptom at the same time, because it is coming into your fields to make itself known. So when you start feeling these things, it's like your soul is making these things known so that you can process them. And something that actually came through when you said that is maybe having realizations of good past lives too, because I know we spoke about bad karma and stuff, but there may be like personality traits or like traits within you that come through from past lives. So you, as you say, you may have been like a king or like a leader, or you may have been like really successful in your career, and that comes through, and then you start having these good traits in your life because you're reclaiming some of the things that you've like learned in different areas throughout the lives. So like, for example, if somebody's doing really well at work all of a sudden, and they've like cleared some of the bad karma, but then the leadership like abilities from other lives and things they've mastered come through, it's like they can be gifts as you're ascending as well, to like reintegrate parts of your soul. And the other thing which is interesting is soul retrieval. So like retrieving parts of your soul from other lives that you've left behind, and then, as you say, it reintegrates back in your body, and it reintegrates back into your field. Because sometimes if you do the spiritual work and you clear like a certain aspect of your life that's causing trouble, you may regain part of your soul that you lost at some point in a positive way. So like becoming more strong or assertive, or like setting boundaries, or being really focused, like that retrieves part of the soul that may have been lost in a certain life where you had that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've also found, and I think some people can relate, but as we sort of go through this ascension process, or as we become an even greater version of ourselves, I think we're going to be more in touch with things from our past lives. And sometimes that can also bring about a healing element to it too, because sometimes, like, let's say, for example, somebody had intuition in a past life, which is very common, that in a past life that could have gone very bad for somebody, where they were perhaps martyred or persecuted in some capacity. So it can kind of cause people to almost become introverted about certain abilities, or scared to kind of open up. And it happens on a subconscious level, I think. But as these sort of awaken within us, it can trigger these things, like you said, within us, and we can kind of start to accumulate I like to call it our divine talents from past lifetimes too. And have you ever had an experience where, as we're opening up some of these other past lives, that we could actually include guides or angels that we've worked with in other lifetimes that want to kind of step back in to help us through that?
I've never actually had that. That's actually sparked a really nice idea in me, because that's something I could definitely like bring in and do in my work as well. That's actually a really interesting point, because I've never really thought that you bring in the guides from those past lives. Mm-hmm. That's really fascinated me, actually, because I think I've always known that on like an intuitive level, but I've never worked with those energies. For me, it's been more like like sometimes, like as you say, some of the people in your life that you meet and have really strong love with on a soul level, they have been your guides before. So they, as you say, you can probably channel that energy back, but you probably meet people that have been guides in past lives anyway, in human form this time. I've actually had it a couple of times, so this is going to sound really crazy, but I've actually seen people, so say I'll be on like the tube, or I'll be in like the park or something, and this is going to sound crazy, but it's definitely a thing. I've seen like people who are definitely not human. They're like, they've stepped in from like another dimension, or they're a guide that comes to see how I'm doing, and I know who that person is. Have you ever had that, Stacey? It's the weirdest thing ever.
I've experienced something similar to that, and I always feel like it's sort of like when I've had that happen, I kind of feel like I'm on an episode of like, What Would You Do? I don't know if you've ever seen that show.
Stacey, I've had the same thing. It's like so weird. Right decision. It's so weird.
Yeah,
I've had that before. But yeah, no, that's actually really interesting. I'm glad you brought that up, because I might start looking into that for myself, and like doing that in healing practice, is like looking at the guides from those past lives to come in, because that would be really, really powerful.
Yeah, and I experienced that when I was going through kind of my own past life stuff, and I realized that on a soul level, I incarnated a lot in the Norse culture. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Norse and like the Viking. And so I had worked a lot with like the energy of Odin and things like that. So as I started reconnecting into certain gifts that I had from other past lives, the energy of those guides or those divine beings from that culture like wanted to start to work with me a little bit. So it was really interesting how it all incorporates, because it will trigger, I kind of think of it, it always reminds me of the scene from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, the original one, where they drink the drink and it's like fizzy and they start floating up in the air.
Yeah.
This accumulation that starts happening within us to bring us to this greater version of ourselves. So like I said, this conversation, past lives are so fascinating, and so many topics that we can cover with this. I guess, what is something that you have found that is important for people to know right now about past lives that maybe they're not super aware of?
Say that they're easy to clear with a healer, and also there are tools that people can use to clear those patterns. And I think that that's actually really important, because past lives are fascinating, but what's actually the most like beneficial to understand is how you can use them to do change work in your current life, because it's so fascinating, like knowing what you've been, but there's no point in knowing that without like having the change in this life. So I think that I know we can both do past life clearings, and we can do energy healings to clear past lives. And that is something that if people were watching and wanted to go into them and clear patterns from past lives, that they can come to like healers such as the two of us. But I think it's also knowing that if a pattern comes up and you establish that there may be past life connections, you can ask spirit to clear the energy for you. Even if it's not going to be fully clear, it will clear to a certain level. And also, if you establish where a certain pattern came from, so although we've been talking so much about past lives, if we get to the root in this life of where it came from and who it came from with, actually having the understanding of, so if like, for example, if you're having, let me think of an example. So you may have like an image with your body image, for example, and you maybe journal and write down, this is how I feel about my body image, and then think, okay, when did this first ever start? So when's the first time I ever felt this? And it may be, oh, when I was like 5 years old, someone made a comment to me about my weight, or when I was 5 years old, like I had like a really bad experience with food, or so, like whatever that is, or like I looked at myself in the mirror and I saw that like something was wrong with my body, or like I had a body dysfunction when I was younger, like whatever that was, like you'll remember the first time that you ever felt that way. And it's like, if you establish the first time you ever felt that way in this life, and you recognize that that probably had roots in the past life, but you know where it came from, sometimes the sheer awareness of knowing where something came from is enough to break it, because we're so unconscious to our patterns that sometimes it doesn't need loads and loads of work. Like it can become a daily practice of just understanding that what you're feeling doesn't necessarily have to stay that way, or your belief about something. So if, like we said about body image, if you don't like your body, it's important to first of all know when you started feeling that, and then second of all reframing it and be like, well, I don't need to feel like this anymore, because what I felt back then wasn't real. I created a false narrative in my head, or in my mind, or in my subconscious. I created a false narrative based on that experience. And you can know that that came from past lives, and you can have like images, or you can be told where that came from in a past life, but also knowing the exact place it started in this life can like change the way you see it. So there's a lot of power in using past lives and using when it first started in this life and who it was with to understand that it can change. So then the awareness of the problem becomes the change work.
Absolutely. I think that's so wonderful for people to understand, because it can be really simple, and it can be as simple as, like you said, just bringing it to our awareness, and sometimes I think it's important when we see it to also speak it and understand it, so it kind of gets out of our body, that we're working through that, to kind of be like, I see you now, and I understand you. And because I think for a lot of us in this lifetime, it is, for some, we're on a path of self-mastery and coming back to the self and reclaiming all of those pieces from our past selves and present self, and being sort of the best that we can. Have you ever experienced, well, how do you view past life fears? I think that's a really good question.
What did you say? Sorry, I didn't hear your question.
Past life fears?
Oh, fears.
Yeah,
I think that it's so interesting with that sort of stuff, like even on like a small level, like somebody who's like really scared of snakes, or like really scared of spiders, and it's like that's because their soul had a bad experience with that thing. And like it is so interesting that a lot of the things that you fear in this life is because you've had it, and it's really telling like what you're just automatically scared of. Like I get scared of like, what's the word? I get scared of heart attacks, and then I found out through spirit that that's because I'd had heart attacks in past lives, and I'd like had a bad experience. Or like my partner was really, really scared of getting shot, and we were in the cinema and we were watching a film, and like he just could not stand the shooting, whereas I was fine with it. And it's like, yeah, that's because he's had past lives where he was shot. And it's like, it's so telling, like even though those things are categorically like so scary, like I'm not taking that away from people, that it is a natural and like it's a normal fear to have like fears of scary things. But those things that hit you on a really deep level, it's because your soul has experienced them. It's not a coincidence. Like if you're really scared of being shot or hung, or like even like it doesn't, for example, for beheading with me, it doesn't, like my body doesn't react, because I don't have like it's stored within me that it might have happened, but I'm not carrying that like pain and hurt or fear with it. So I think, as you say, like it's quite telling what we're scared of, but it's not necessary. And normally, so with fear, if you have a fear, it normally won't come true. As in, like, if you're scared of like having a heart attack or getting shot, it's like that's past life, it's not real. Like it may have been real at one point, but it's not real anymore. So actually having the awareness that it was past life is actually liberating, because you're like, okay, I understand why I'm scared of that thing, but that's actually come up for a reason, because it's not going to happen again. My body and my soul just want to process it.
Yeah. And it can range in so many different ways. And sometimes, like you said, I have absolute faith that you'll be able to work through that, especially when the time is right. And that's usually when you'll be able to work through it. But it's so interesting how it can play such a role, for us. And sometimes I think too, just going back to the karma, for example, because there is good and bad karma that we can carry with different people. But I think that we also have the opportunity to work through karmic stuff too in what we could call other dimensions. So let's say when we cross over in this lifetime too, we could actually work through certain karmic things in another dimension without maybe necessarily incarnating again back on Earth. Too. So it's just, there's so much fascinating stuff that can come from past lives and how it's so relevant to us now. And I've heard that, time is linear. So past lives, they're happening simultaneously.
Yeah, they are.
And so that can be really kind of hard for people to understand, but I think that it can also help people understand sometimes why we feel something so intensely, or why something can be triggered within us, or where we're even drawn to certain places, like the element of sort of deja vu, where we felt we can go to a place and feel so connected to that element of that place, perhaps because we've had past lives there. And
this is really interesting. You said this. I've got a really quick story about this thing about places. So sometimes we'll get taken to places in the world, like on a trip with work, or we'll get taken to a place with like a holiday, like maybe you get invited on a holiday somewhere, and you've actually gone to that place for your soul because your soul has been there before. And I had the weirdest experience. So as part of a work trip once, like not for spiritual work, but when I was working in a different role, I was asked to go on a work trip. And obviously I'm from the UK, I'm from London. And the work trip, it was so weird because they'd invited me to go and work on a project in America. And I asked the manager who was like in charge of what the job we were going to work on. I said, "Oh, so where in America is it?" And he goes, "We're going to Salem." And I thought, that is the weirdest place, isn't it? That's the weirdest place that to go to if you're from London. Like you'd normally go to like New York, or you'd go to Boston or Washington, or like you'd go to like, I don't know, like maybe San Francisco. But no, I was going to Salem. Like, what sort of, if you were in a London job, why on earth would you be going to Salem? Especially me being picked to go on this job out of like hundreds of people who was working in the same office. And it was because, as you probably can pick up this already, because of the witch trials, which is not like, it's not what's the word? It's not unusual that would happen for someone who is into healing, that they would have been part of like witch trials or something. But I was fascinated. I was like, I cannot believe I have this opportunity paid for by like the work at the time to go to Salem, out of all places. And it was obviously, and when I found out where it was, my jaw just dropped, and I was like, it's so obvious that I was part of those witch trials and I'm going back there to experience it. Mm-hmm. And the weirdest thing was, it gets even weirder, I was in the Salem Witch Museum with colleagues from work at the time, and there was like the fire alarm started going off, so we were evacuated, and like the fire brigade came out and stuff, and I was like, this has definitely happened for my soul. Like my soul needed to like come here and experience this. And when else would I have gone to Salem? Like it's such a weird place to go for someone in the UK, like unless you were going to Boston or something, but I would have never gone there without it. So that was a really interesting one.
Yeah, and like you said, oftentimes we can be drawn back to a place to maybe feel something within us, or to unlock something within us too, and for that next journey or that next step in our own evolution to where we're going with that. That's
it's so fascinating.
And of all the places, that is just so fantastic. And I have absolutely no doubt that you were there, during that time period. It's so fascinating. And I've even had people who have traveled like from the United States to places like Greece or Italy, and where they've just been really drawn to that, or some people who just feel like it's something within them, like they just have to kind of go somewhere or experience something, that we can all sort of relate to. And I had, even though it's not, and I've been to Salem before, and I'm from New England, so it's not uncommon for someone from New England to go to Salem. But even this past summer, I had an experience when I went somewhere, and I just was always, the first time I found out about it, I just was really drawn there. And I was always like, I really want to go there, but it kind of had felt unattainable to me. And then while I was there, Spirit led me to the fact that when I was incarnated in that area during like the 1800s, I always wanted to go there, but because of where my soul was on the class level, it wasn't attainable for me to go. So now, like the way that Spirit worked it out, like everything aligned for me to go. And so I was sort of having this sort of past life wish fulfillment by being able to go to and
that's lovely.
that I felt like I had sort of, I don't want to phrase it this way, but like missed out on. So it just felt like this whole full circle with it. So sometimes I also feel like we can go to places and experience things as sort of this, I like to think of it as like the Wheel of Fortune card, of like that circle completion, and be able to experience that.
Yeah, definitely. I have that a bit with China. Like I really want to go to China, and there's no reason for it. When I was little, like when I was really little, I used to just dream about the Great Wall of China, and I just really wanted to go. And I think that's probably one of these wishes from a different life, that you want to travel somewhere. So I 100% understand that.
Absolutely. Because I would imagine that just like how past life memories live within us, in essence, sort of past life wishes may even still resonate within us too, of things that we want to fulfill or experience on a soul level to go through the experience.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
Awesome. Well, did you have anything else that you want to share with people today?
That I can think of. I just think this is such a fascinating topic, and like I just encourage everyone who's watching the video to look out for like areas of their lives which may have like come from past lives. And I think that people out there watching, like if you have like a hunch that it could come from a past life, like it's so powerful to meditate on it, and like spirit will normally like show you. Like if you meditate and like you practice meditation, you can even ask the image to come into your head or like into your body, and you'll probably find out where it's come from. Or like even if you need help with that, like there's so many different modalities to explore past lives with. So it's just something that's so interesting, and it's also so fun. Like it's so good for healing, but it's so fun. Like me and Stacey talking about these stories that we've had, like once you get into the realms of past life and understand them, like it's a fun experience to kind of delve into and see where you've been and what you've done and who you've been. It's like it's really, really fun.
Yeah, and I also think it helps us understand ourselves better too.
Yeah, definitely. And very fun and interesting.
Yeah, and just have better wisdom of the whole universal elements of stuff and a deeper understanding.
Yeah, 100%. Really agree.
Well, this has been so fascinating, and I think, like you said, like we both said, it's a topic that is just so filled with such information that we could have many talk shows just about past lives and how they affect us now in this lifetime too. And I encourage anybody out there watching, if you haven't already, to book a session with Ciara, work with her through her healing modalities, or if you want to explore past lives, book a session with her and explore our other readers here at Soul Navigation. And Ciara, thank you so much for joining us here today. It was such a pleasure to interview you for this week's Talk Show Tuesday.
Thank you, Stacey.
Thank you everybody for watching.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.